Have you ever walked away from an argument thinking, wait, what just happened? You didn't mean to start a fight, but somehow it spiraled and left both of you frustrated, misunderstood, and exhausted. It's weird, right? We spend our whole lives talking to people, yet things get tense. But do not blame yourself. You're not bad at communicating. You're not the problem. You're just missing a better way to show your thoughts. And that's exactly what we'll explore today. We're talking about a powerful psychology framework mentioned by Bo Seo. Seo is a Harvard excellent alumnus, a two-time world debate champion, and someone who studied arguments not just to win, but to understand. Let's find out how. Why do we keep having bad arguments? Let's be honest, we've all had that kind of argument. You're in a very normal conversation, and suddenly, you raise your idea, give an argument, and evidence to protect it, and suddenly, everything is out of control. According to Bo Seo, a Harvard graduate, debate champion, and author of Good Arguments, our conversations today are in crisis. Not because we don't talk enough, but because we don't know how to disagree properly. And when our arguments go bad, we don't just hurt our relationships. We start believing that meaningful disagreement is impossible. And this is the hidden problem. Most of us learn how to argue the same way we learn how to fight with our siblings, by just jumping in without any strategy, training, or rules. Just emotion, heat, and maybe a little sarcasm. And the result? Arguments that go in circles. People are getting defensive and angry. No one feels heard. Bo Seo calls this a modern crisis of communication. Why? Because we don't treat disagreement as a skill to be learned. We treat it like something we just do, often badly. That's why Bo Seo leads us to a better way to disagree. There's a simple, science-backed tool to help us navigate conflict with more clarity and less chaos. It's called the RISA Framework, and once you know it, you won't see arguments the same way again. RISA stands for Real, Important, Specific, Aligned. Before jumping into an argument, especially one that could escalate, SEO suggests we ask ourselves 4 simple questions. The first question, is the disagreement real? Sometimes what sounds like an argument is actually a misunderstanding. Like when your friend says, "You're always late," and you fire back, "I'm only 5 minutes late." You never say anything when you're late. But if you take a breath, you might realize they weren't really upset that much. They just need your honest apology at that very moment. So keep asking your inner, is this a real conflict, or we just make it more serious? The second question, is it important enough to bring up? Not every disagreement needs to become a full-blown discussion. It's mean nothing is really serious to destroy the true relation. This isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about being intentional. Does this issue matter enough to risk tension? Sometimes the healthiest move is not to speak louder, but to let it go. If it's big, make it small. If it's small, make it doesn't matter. The third question, is it specific? Ever been in a fight that started about dirty dishes, then keeping agreement, and somehow ended up being about every mistake since 2020? Yeah, that's what happens when the disagreement isn't specific. The brain doesn't do well with vague fights. It tries to fill in the blanks, and that's when all your past trauma walks into the room. Bo Seo says, name the disagreement clearly. Don't argue about everything. Neurologically, our brains get overwhelmed when conversations jump topics rapidly. It activates the amygdala, our fight-or-flight center, making it harder to think rationally or stay calm. The fourth question, are both sides aligned in their purpose? This one's big, because sometimes one person wants connection, but the other just wants to win. Ever argue with someone who keeps shifting the topic, or suddenly brings up something completely unrelated just to throw you off? That's misalignment. Before diving deep, ask, are we both here to actually understand each other, or is this just about scoring points? If it's not aligned, it's not going to be productive. What happens when we ignore these steps? So, when we skip the RISA framework, what really goes wrong? Let's say someone makes a comment that makes you feel annoyed, and instead of pausing to think it through, you just go straight into reaction mode. You snap back, they get defensive, voices rise, the tone shifts, the controversy flares up. Suddenly, you're not even talking about the original issue anymore, but the controversy is still on fire. That's what happens when we skip RISA. We enter the argument with no clarity, no shared purpose, and worst of all, no chance of real resolution. When conflict hits without preparation, your brain doesn't go, let's reason through this calmly. It goes, am I under attack? That's because your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, gets activated. And once that kicks in, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic and empathy, gets overpowered. You're no longer listening to understand. You're listening to fight back, or worse, to destroy. High conflict conversations can activate the same brain regions involved in physical threat detection, triggering cortisol spikes and emotional hijacks. So what started as a discussion about why you forgot to text back turns into a war about who always lets the other down, and you both walk away angry, drained, and disconnected. When we argue without knowing what we're arguing for, it creates a dangerous pattern. You say something, they take it the wrong way. You get frustrated, they feel disrespected, you both shut down, rinse and repeat, and at some point the relationship falls apart. But here's the worst part. These repeated bad arguments actually train your brain to expect the worst every time a disagreement starts. Over time, this creates communication trauma, where your nervous system starts reacting to any disagreement like it's a threat. The repeated exposure to high conflict communication lowers your tolerance for disagreement, making you up to 60% more reactive in future conflicts, even with people you love. Worst of all, we start arguing with ourselves. When we've been through enough bad arguments, we don't just avoid conflict with others. We start avoiding it within ourselves. We ignore things that bother us. We silence our own needs. We doubt our thoughts before they're even spoken. And the result? We lose our ability to stand up for ourselves in a healthy way. We confuse peace with silent treatment. We avoid conflict, thinking it's maturity. But really, it's fear. When we start the argument with any rational consider, we pay the price in emotional exhaustion, damaged relationships, missed opportunities for growth. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're not doomed to repeat the same toxic cycles. We just need better tools. And that's exactly why Bo Seo's RISA Framework matters, because it gives us a map through the mess, a way to make disagreement feel safe, structured, and even meaningful.